Do you ever feel overwhelmed by the ever-changing world of technology? Tech It Out can help make some sense of it all. Breaking down geek speak into street speak, technology columnist, author, and TV personality Mark Saltzman covers consumer technology each week for every listener. Mark tackles the latest news, reviews, and how-tos to help you understand what's hot, what's not, and why.
Hey everyone, welcome to Tech It Out, episode 248. Yep, closing in on 250 shows. And next month, the 5th anniversary of Tech It Out. Well, I hope you're having a great day so far, and thank you for making Tech It Out a small part of it. We have a packed show planned for you this hour, so let me tell you who's on board. We're going to start off talking about the gun problem in the country, but are 3D printed guns the issue? My first guest doesn't believe it's to blame, and he'll explain why. After that, my favorite computer company joins us, ASUS. And yes, that's the company I approached to be the title sponsor on this show for full transparency. And we're going to learn what's new in the ASUS Zenbook family of laptops, and a crazy advanced one that was just unveiled last week. Also on Tech It Out, have you ever been part of a class action lawsuit if you were approached to be one of the many plaintiffs? There have been many of these cases tied to tech, like smartphone companies accused of their products not living up to its advertised performance. So should you bother? Absolutely, as you'll hear from our guest from topclassactions.com. All of this and more on an all-new Tech It Out, powered by ASUS. All right, let's kick things off with our first interview. With mass shootings splashed all over the headlines, again, there has been a renewed discussion about stopping the spread of 3D printed gun parts and source code as well, the software that you can download to 3D print these things. But how realistic are these measures in stopping 3D printed guns from being developed and utilized? Well, why not go to the expert on this? So we're joined by Joris Peels. He's executive editor of 3dprint.com and host of the 3D Pod podcast to discuss this hot button issue. Joris, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much for having me.
You know, I think a lot of the nation is really struggling with what's going on. I don't know how much 3D printing is related. I think it's obviously a much bigger issue, but certainly tied to all this. But before we talk about 3D printing guns and gun parts, please tell us a bit about 3dprint.com as well as your other work.
Yeah, so essentially 3dprint.com is like the industry publication, and the 3D Pod is a podcast for the 3D printing industry to kind of get to know a lot about what's happening. And I've been working 3D printing for over 14 years now. Mainly as a consultant. I'm mainly a strategy consultant, so I help big companies kind of navigate this space and try to figure out where the opportunities are for them in 3D printing and where because some of the pitfalls are. And that's basically what I've been doing for most of my 14 years. Okay, cool. And, you know, I know a lot of our listeners are hobbyists. They maybe have dabbled in 3D printing, but let's just take a step back and give everybody sort of a 3D printing 101, if you will. I know it's also referred to as additive manufacturing, right? Can you clarify what we're chatting about here? Yeah, sure. So additive manufacturing is a formal term that we all agree upon for a number of different technologies. And all these technologies are called by the media and a lot of us as well, actually, and in the industry we call it 3D printing. And all these technologies, they layer by layer build up an object. That's what they do. And you're probably familiar with one technology that kind of use a plastic wire that is then melted, and then a shape is drawn. The platform is lowered, and then the next layer of that shape is drawn. That's a really accessible technology that has printers in it that make that cost like around $200 right now. Yeah. We also have like $10,000 printers that work for more of an industry. And we also have like $1 million printers that work in a much more sophisticated way, making a lot more capable parts, let's say. So there's different technologies, and all of them layer by layer make an object, which means that if you want to make something unique, want to make something right now, or of a really particular shape, then it's a really good technology. Or if you want to change that shape very often, it's a really good technology. If you want to make like 1 million identical copies or something, then other technologies are much better. Got it. And what are some of the things that people are 3D printing at home? Well, so most of the people at home are printing like all sorts of stuff. It depends on what you're really doing. We're seeing they're basically going, a lot of them are going to engineers or people that have a certain hobby, whether it be figurines or design or doing things for your interior, that this helps with. It's still not something that your mom could buy, right, set up on the Christmas morning and press a button and it would work, right? It's still something that would take some dedication and some work to actually work. And we've gone from a part where most 3D prints would fail, which was like what the situation was about 10 years ago, ago to now we have printers that work most of the time, but they still need a lot of TLC kind of get it to work and a lot of kind of knowledge. It's not like it doesn't work in the same way your toaster does,
That's true. I get it.
So it's still a little bit different. There's still a little bit of a gulf there.
Okay. So everything from cufflinks to smartphone cases to chess pieces, figurines, like you said. I saw a video online of a dad whose son loves dinosaurs, and he made him like a T-Rex shower head that screwed onto his shower. So yeah, there's lots of fun stuff that you can do. So essentially it melts the plastic that you buy. That's the consumables. And then it from the bottom up, it starts to create this object that hardens. And then you've got this 3D thing. It takes a little while, but I know that speeds are increasing as well. But I really wanted to invite you onto the program to chat about the issue of 3D printing guns and gun parts. Is this really possible? I mean, I recall reading that everything can be 3D printed except for the metal firing pin.
Well, what's really important to know is that there's two different things here. There's two different ways to answer this question. One is if you give someone enough attention and you give them several $100,000 and you let them take a national tour of all the large media and give that person enough time, then of course they're going to eventually print a functional firearm. Right. Now, is that going to be the best way to, in a house, make a firearm? No, because if you just bought a lathe or CNC equipment or just the regular cutting tools, let's say, that you're used to make guns, and if you did that in your house, then it would be easier and you'd end up with a better gun. Right? Yeah. So this is particularly a shape that we are not exactly great at making. And if you're worried about people using like a milling tool, so the people that started this 3D printed gun movement are now using milling tools to do the same thing, because of course those are tools that industrial factories use to make guns, and that would be the easier way for you to make an actual weapon that would actually work. So, and that's the one thing. And the second thing is a bit of a, it's how people interpret new technologies. If I told you that I was a glass blower and I did that as a hobby, and I told you I could make any shape out of glass, you wouldn't say, my car needs a bumper, right? And I'll be, oh yeah, could you blow me a bumper? Yeah, of course I could. Right? Of course I could make you a bumper eventually. You wouldn't ask that though, because you would be like, well, glass, that's good, but that's not suited for my bumper, because we understand glass. We understand that material. The same thing, could I use glass blowing to make a gun? Of course I could. Given enough time and money, I would make a functional gun out of glass, right? And then it could do all sorts of cool things, like it could go through airport security, and it could nobody could see it, and it'd be really exciting.
Yeah, that's the concern for me about a plastic gun, is that it can get through a metal detector.
Yeah, exactly. But I could do it with glass as well. But the thing is that's not exactly the process you would make to make an undetectable gun. Or if the goal is to make an undetectable gun, you wouldn't think, you know what, we're going to start with glass. Right? There's lots of other materials and lots of other processes you would make to make that. 3D printing is an accessible technology that allows you to go very quickly from an idea to a part.
Yeah, prototype.
But it doesn't mean that you're going from an idea to a functional part, or it doesn't mean that part is the best part possible. I think we're ignited everyone's imagination by saying we can make anything on the desktop. It's not all functional, and we're not always the best technology.
We're chatting with Joris Peels, executive editor of 3dprint.com and host of the 3D Pod podcast. We're chatting about 3D printed gun parts and source code. But I have seen YouTube videos of a functional 3D printed gun, and I'm going back a couple of years now. So please confirm that it can be done. It just may not be the best material or approach, is what you're suggesting.
Yeah, sure. The issue is that one could do it. There have been some people doing it. Thank goodness they're not very good engineers, and they haven't done a very good job.
But is this just a matter of time?
It depends. I mean, we can make any shape. So the 3D printing is a Pandora's box in that sense, that anything that could be made eventually will get made.
Yeah, it's up to the humans to determine whether it's used for good or evil, right? I mean, look, a 3D printer can 3D print a custom prosthetic to help a young boy kick a ball, but it can also be used to also 3D print a gun. So you can't blame the technology, it's the people behind it.
No, exactly. It's the people behind it. But then the next step is then to say, okay, look, let's have a little bit of moment of moral panic, because it could be possible, right? And the thing is that it's still illegal to manufacture a gun, whatever you do, if you make it out of clay or if you make it on a 3D printer or a mill at home. I'm really against like specific legislation being enacted, because that's a bit of a kind of like, legal theater kind of thing, because it's not going to change, because it's legal to make a gun now if you do it with a mill or a lathe or whatever instrument. So then having a specific rule for 3D printing is a bit, I think it's a bit contrived. It doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, and this is why I wanted to talk to you about that. I'm glad you brought it up. So there have been efforts to stop the 3D printing of guns and gun parts and all that. The Biden administration has announced something recently, and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is taking aim at handguns with new regulations as well. So what's your take on that? So you just think this is a moot sort of effort?
Well, I think with regards to 3D printing guns, it would be difficult. Well, I don't think extra legislation will help in that sense. I can understand that especially in a time like this, we would want legislation to help reduce the availability of guns. But still, the point is that it would take me like a week to print a gun. And it's still much easier to get it in a conventional way.
Yeah, good point.
So is this going to solve the problem or anything? Like, it's a very different discussion, and that's if we're talking about a country like Japan, right? In Japan, it's almost impossible to get guns, right? It's very restricted. Gun ownership is very restricted, and the authorities have been very good at banning guns from society. So in that case, in Japan, there could be a legitimate discussion. Right, because you could worry about if this new technology could introduce something that is almost absent from this group of islands. But in a place like the United States of America, where they have 450 million guns, I don't think this is going to solve anything.
Yeah,
because the guns are available and we can continue to get them. Now, can we make it? Yeah, sure. And we can make lots of other shapes and lots of other things that could be used in a very criminal way as well. Can we do anything against that? And I don't really see. There's no technical way I know that you could keep a particular functionality from existing. Right? So you could ban certain shapes, but then we would just change the shapes and make the thing function differently. Right. So there's no real way to stop the printer or to stop somebody from designing a particular thing.
Is it hard to find a design of a 3D gun online today?
I think so, actually. I think I'm pretty sure that you could find it somewhere. There's always some corner of the web.
Dark web.
The magical dark web, which was populated by journalists looking for new stories, and probably somewhere. Yes, on the major websites, of course, don't have them.
All right, 3dprint.com. Yours Peels has been our guest. Great to chat with you. Thank you so much for your time and your insight.
Thank you so much.
Feel free to engage with me about gun violence and 3D printing on social media. I'll confirm all my handles on all the platforms when we return. More Tech It Out coming right up after this.
Listen to Tech It Out whenever you want. Find the Tech It Out podcast at iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Tech It Out, everyone. I'm looking forward to chatting with ASUS in a moment, the title sponsor of this show. But first, per our last interview, I offered to discuss the gun violence problem and the role that technology plays, including 3D printed parts and guns and software designs of guns that you may be able to freely get on the internet or maybe not. Happy to engage with you on social media. I'll spell my name in a moment, but if you're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, it's Mark Saltzman, MarkSaltzman. Again, Mark Saltzman, Mark with a C, Saltzman with a Z. I also write a tech tip of the day. If you want to follow me on any of these platforms, I post videos, a link to all my articles that I write for USA Today and AARP and Costco Connection and so on. Of course, I link to all Tech It Out content so you can learn more about my guests and hear the interviews all over again. Subscribe to the podcast and so on. But I would love to hear from you about this sensitive topic of gun violence and the role that tech plays. All right, this show is powered by ASUS for those in search of incredible. ASUS creates technology for today and tomorrow's smart life, and that includes its line of award-winning laptops and desktops, accessories like keyboards and mice and monitors. There's mobile tech, smartphones and smartwatches, tablets, and so on. For those in search of incredible, visit asus.com/US/radio for more info. That's asus.com/US/radio. And speaking of ASUS, I promised I'd let you in on this new Zenbook laptop that was just unveiled, so let's get to that. If it's been a while since you bought a new laptop, you're going to be blown away at what's available. ASUS just unveiled a new range of Zenbook and VivoBook models at their Pinnacle of Performance event the other week. And so to tell us all about them is Philip Shung. He's Associate Product Manager at ASUS North America. Welcome to the show, Philip. Good to chat with you again.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Hey, before we talk about the ASUS Zenbook Pro 14 Duo OLED laptop, which I think was one of the stars of your event a couple of weeks back, please give us an ASUS 101, if you will, for those who are listening that have probably seen the brand ASUS, but maybe don't know much about it.
Sure thing, Mark. ASUS as a brand got our start over 30 years ago. In the very beginning, we weren't even a computer brand. We started out in like the components of computer, like motherboards, graphics cards, and so on and so forth. Eventually, we kind of made our way into the big leagues, right? We started saying, you know what, let's just not just produce the components. We're going to actually make laptops of our own. And then basically that started on a long journey for us developing, pushing the edges of innovation, trying to present the best and brightest, the latest and greatest laptops.
And with that in mind, you do have many different laptop brands. You've got VivoBook, Chromebook, ExpertBook, StudioBooks, and ZenBooks. Could you break down some of the differences?
Sure. Talking about the ones that you mentioned earlier, like VivoBooks and Chromebooks. VivoBooks are sort of our mainstream devices. This is for anyone who maybe a college student who's looking for their first computer going to college, or someone getting their feet wet, getting into the workforce. Chromebook, a lot of Chromebook devices are consumed within the education segment. A lot of younger students from K to 12 might interact with a Chromebook, but it's not to say that a Chromebook isn't great for, say, at home, browsing Netflix and so on.
Yeah, basic tasks primarily, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. ExpertBooks are more of our commercial devices. So, like a workplace device, those kind of rubbing shoulders, if you use like an HP or a Dell device at work, you know what? ExpertBook would fit right along with you.
Right. So beefier security, longer battery life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, better warranty and so on and so forth. Again, because expected in the workplace. The StudioBook and the ZenBook, specifically the ZenBook, is kind of our pride and joy. This is our flagship, the best, the premium devices, whereas say VivoBook or Chromebook might say, okay, we want to make sure this is price conscious, right? Someone that's, doesn't hit the wallet too bad.
Yeah.
ZenBooks are like, well, this is something where we're being like, you pull out a ZenBook and it's going to draw the eyes. Everyone's going to look at it and be like, wow, that's an amazing design. It's like, this is something that people can carry with them on the go, be it workplace, be it at home and leisure. But again, we want to make sure we compromise on nothing for the ZenBook.
Yeah, great. In fact, I produced this entire radio show and podcast on a ZenBook. So I'm both personally and professionally excited to hear about what's new in this family. So again, it's the ASUS Zenbook Pro 14 Duo OLED. Bit of a mouthful, but there's a reason for all those words in the official name of the product. Please tell us about it at a high level.
Yes, as you notice, it is a little bit of a mouthful, but every single word in there has an intent and a purpose to it, right? So what is this device at a high level? The Zenbook Pro 14 Duo OLED is Zenbook. It's a 14-inch device that has two screens on it, hence why we call it Duo. One of the cool things about it is that it comes with the latest 12th gen i7 or i9 Intel CPUs. This is the core piece that allows the computer to move and to do everything it needs to do. We also didn't compromise on the rest of the specs. It comes with a gaming level graphics card. You can do pretty much anything you want to do on this device.
Awesome. So I want to unpack some of this. So let's start with the screen. I think that's what makes it unique. So there's a secondary display, but it's not side by side. Please explain how it looks, since this is, a radio or podcast interview.
I know, right? A picture is worth 1,000 words sometimes. All right. So on a normal laptop, right, the top half is the screen, the bottom half is the keyboard and the touchpad. That's pretty much all you get to play with. Yeah. However, for the Zenbook Pro 14 Duo OLED, we decided to mix things up a little bit, right? The top half is a screen. Can't change anything about that. But on the bottom half, we move the keyboard down to the bottom half of the device, and above it, there's a secondary display. All right. So basically, think of your existing laptop and then now add 50% screen size to it. And it's all on the same device. So the top half of the screen is a 14-inch OLED device. Now, some of you might have seen like OLED TVs. It's the exact same technology. So that unmatched color, that unmatched brightness, looking at an OLED screen versus not OLED screen is night and day. You'd be like, wow, these colors are so vibrant. It's incredible. And then on top of that, we also give it a 120 hertz refresh panel.
And we'll talk about the significance of that and other features of this new Zenbook when we return on Tech It Out with our guest from ASUS. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
Want to follow Mark? Google him. Mark with a C and Saltzman with a Z. Breaking down geek speak into street speak. This is Tech It Out. Tech It Out with technology columnist, author, and TV personality Mark Saltzman.
Welcome back to Tech It Out. We are chatting with Philip Shung, Associate Product Manager at ASUS North America. We're learning about some of the new products unveiled at the company's Pinnacle of Performance virtual event the other week, including this new Zenbook Pro 14 Duo OLED laptop. Before the break, Philip, you were talking to us about the gorgeous colors and contrast of the OLED panel, but you also mentioned 120 hertz refresh rate. Can you explain what that's all about?
That means that when you're browsing or when you're watching these very action-packed sequences from a movie, sometimes if the screen isn't capable enough, you're going to be like, wow, that seemed to jump a little bit. Did I miss something right there? That's because a screen is not capable of keeping up with the incredibly fast motion. But with a 120 hertz panel, there's not going to be that problem. We're going to make sure that, regardless if you're gaming, watching movies, doing professional work, anything you need, the screen is not going to let you down. And that's just the top screen, right? The bottom screen is very capable IPS level panel, and the entire display, both top and bottom, supports touch, supports stylus, and the possibilities are endless.
All right. So with that in mind, let's talk about some of the applications for having a second screen. A lot of our listeners may be saying, well, why do I need that? Is it fair to say that on your main screen, which is that 14-inch OLED display, that could be, say, your canvas, but then that secondary display that is just above your keyboard can be your palette, like if you're a digital artist, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. Yeah. So some of the, professional creators who, be they, engineers, be they architects, the top half can be your canvas. You're designing things, you're moving things around, and the bottom half can be either a control panel where you can make minute adjustments, or you might say, I need to take a better look at this. Let me use the bottom screen as a reference material. So you're not bouncing back and forth between different screens. You're saying, okay, I can measure this on the top screen. I can take a look at what I'm referencing on the bottom of the screen. That's for someone who's using it for maybe like a work purpose, right? For someone who's maybe using the Zenbook Pro Duo 14 as a gaming device, they can be playing the game on the top screen, and then using on the bottom screen, they can maybe be chatting with friends, or if they're a streamer, they're interacting with their audience. Again, and on top of that, let's just say, well, you might say, I don't need to do two different things. Can I use the top and bottom screen together? The answer is yes. You can use the bottom screen simply as an extension of the top screen. So it's, 50% more room for you to work with all on one screen.
Oh, very cool. Could you also do something, Philip, like on your main screen, you could be browsing the web, checking your email and all that, but on the bottom screen, you could be watching a video?
Absolutely. And for those of you who are in the workplace who are using this, don't tell you I said that, but yes, you can absolutely do that.
All right. That's something that you don't want the boss to know about, but that's pretty cool. Yeah. And as you said, you can use your fingertip or a stylus pen if you like on either of these screens. They're both touch enabled, as most Zenbooks are. Now, Philip, I've seen some pictures of this new laptop online. Haven't seen it in person yet, but there's something interesting in the airflow department. Can you talk to us about that and why it's important?
So one of the really cool innovations that ASUS has debuted on the Zenbook series is the concept of the ergo lift hinge. Now, what is that? Conventionally, when you open up a laptop, the bottom half of the laptop just sits flat on the surface of wherever you're working with, be it your lap, be it a tabletop, and so on and so forth. This really doesn't help, the device to cool itself because, it gets overheated. It's right slap next onto a tabletop. That doesn't really help. An ergolift hinge lifts the bottom of the computer, just that little bit off the surface that you're working with. This gives it much better airflow. So cold air can come in, helping cool off the device, making the device that much more efficient and less likely to be, a hot potato on your lap.
And that could also help in the battery department, right? Because the more that a laptop gets hot, typically it eats away at the battery that much faster.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And despite the fact that it's super thin and light, you said there's a very powerful processor under the hood. It's an Intel Core family device and with great graphics. So when you're playing games, it can render images really smoothly, which is important. But now let's end off on connectivity. What kind of ports does it have alongside the Zenbook, as well as wirelessly? I'm assuming it has, Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth and all that. Can you talk to us about it?
Yeah, it does come with Wi-Fi 6E, which is the latest and greatest Intel Wi-Fi technology. Great. It also comes with Bluetooth in case, you need it for, wireless mice, wireless headsets, and so on and so forth. One major hallmark of Zenbook is, despite it being thin and light, we want to make sure that we compromise on none of the ports. All right. Listening to user feedback, they're like, hey, we really love to have Thunderbolt 4. We're like, we're going to give you Thunderbolt 4. You want, USB, micro HDMI, audio jacks. Guess what? You get the full package, because one of the kind of the darnest things is you pick up a brand new laptop and you're like, I'm missing that port I really need. Well, you won't have this problem with Zenbook.
The Zenbook that I have that I cited earlier, the one I used to produce this radio show and podcast, it came with an adapter that plugs into the USB-C port on the side. And then you can add more legacy USB-A devices and HDMI and stuff like that as well. So it was nice that it was included in the box.
Of course.
All right, Philip, as we wrap up, where can we learn more about the ASUS Zenbook Pro 14 Duo OLED? No doubt we've piqued many listeners' interest, including pricing and configuration options. What website would you recommend?
You can always find out more information from our official website at asus.com/US. So that's www.asus.com/US.
And this is available in June, right? Next week.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Philip, thanks so much for your time. Great to chat with you. And congrats on the launch of this new Zenbook. Very exciting.
Thanks for having us.
Speaking of computers, don't forget to properly back up your important files on a regular basis, whether you do it on an external hard drive or an SSD, solid state drive. It could be a USB thumb drive, a SD card or micro SD card. I love local or offline storage as much as I embrace the cloud for offsite storage. And next week on the show, we will chat with Western Digital about some new solutions that they've got, both internal and external solutions, especially for content creators, YouTubers and podcasters and anybody who's creating content even on the go. We're going to learn all about these affordable solutions, these solid state or SSD drives from Western Digital and SanDisk. I wanted to take a moment before our next break to chat a bit about Visa and the work that they've done to invest in anti-fraud measures. Did you know that online shoppers are 3 times more likely to enter an unfamiliar store if it displays a Visa logo? And customers are 5 times more likely to think a merchant is reputable. This is because Visa has invested billions over the years in fraud prevention, so you don't need to think twice about shopping at retail or online with your Visa card, nor should businesses be concerned about secure payments. Visa is deploying advanced technology to ensure customer data is not vulnerable no matter where the transactions are taking place. This includes tokens pioneered by Visa as part of the solution, which reduces the risk of identity theft because this technology replaces your cardholder information with a random alphanumeric code so that the merchant never actually sees your card number, yet ensures a fast transaction as well. To learn more about Visa's work in protecting you and your purchases, head over to visa.com/security. When we return on Tech It Out, we're going to catch up with topclassactions.com about why you should consider being one of the many plaintiffs in a class action lawsuit against a tech company. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
Breaking down geek speak into street speak. Tech It Out, hosted by Mark Saltzman.
Welcome back to Tech It Out. Have you ever been asked if you want to be part of a group of plaintiffs in a class action lawsuit? Well, as a techie, I know mostly of these smartphone-related ones that have popped up over the years, usually with Apple or Samsung. Should you do it if you're asked to be part of a suit, or should you ignore it? Well, for the 411 on class action lawsuits, who better to chat with than Scott Hardy, president of topclassactions.com, which connects you to class action lawsuits, settlements, and attorneys in the US, Canada, and the UK. Thanks for your time, Scott. Good to chat with you.
Fantastic to be here. Thank you, Mark.
I should tell our listeners that I also interviewed you recently for an AARP article that will be published next week. So after we spoke, I'm thinking, wow, I should have Scott on my radio show. You're such a wealth of information. So thanks for carving out some time to chat. Before we talk about topclassactions.com, let's just first clarify what a class action lawsuit is all about. I'm sure most of my listeners know, but let's start at ground zero here.
Absolutely. A class action lawsuit is one lawsuit filed by one person, but it affects hundreds, if not thousands, or even millions of people because everybody has a very similar claim.
All right. So it's a group of people usually, but is it usually like one firm that goes after a company and then that firm reaches out to customers who have maybe purchased that product or service?
Exactly. To use your example, it might be you who said, I have an iPhone that has a defective antenna and it's dropping calls. And so you can file that class action, but all of us who have iPhones and have that same problem can participate and can submit a claim in an eventual settlement if that happens.
Got it. So talk to us now about topclassactions.com. What's the platform all about?
So I started topclassactions.com 14 years ago to connect consumers to cash they could claim from lawsuits and settlements. Back then, there was less than a 1% claim rate for class action settlements, and I wanted to make it easy, free, and really easy to understand what these class actions were all about, to connect people to cash. Because in a class action, if you don't claim that cash for that settlement, then it goes away. You don't have an opportunity. You can't go back a year later and get it.
Right.
So you only have a finite amount of time to submit your claim and participate.
And to be clear, you're not an attorney, right?
Correct. I'm a tech geek. I've always been in IT. I had the idea and just built the website, and now here we are 14 years later.
Awesome. And how successful has topclassactions.com been?
Well, it's pretty cool. I started out my first newsletter. We had 32 people on it that were friends, family. And now we get more than 1 million people on our newsletters that go out every week.
Wow.
We're generating millions of dollars a year in revenue, all from law firms who pay to advertise, or from Google who pays to advertise on the website.
Sure.
It's grown. It's generally greatly beloved by people because we're connecting them to the cash they can claim.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it sounds like a win-win, right? If it's free and they're getting this information that's timely, because again, if you miss the boat, then you miss the boat. So you're providing a sort of comprehensive look at all the different class action lawsuits out there, and not just tech. We should clarify, it's not just smartphone ones that I brought up as an example. It's all kinds of class action suits.
Absolutely. It's the consumer class action lawsuit, whether it be ice cream, air conditioning, cell phones, or, roofing shingles that you might put on your house. We'll cover it if we think it affects a lot of consumers.
I'm going to ask your advice in a moment about whether it's worth it. I think I know what your answer is. But before we get to that, when it does come to smartphone related class action lawsuits against companies like Apple and Samsung, not to keep picking on them, are they still happening? And how would we know? Do we get like a card in the mail? Do we get an email as a potential plaintiff?
Yeah, you want to pay attention to your text messages, to your emails. Apple is especially good at communicating out to their customers. I always say if there's a consumer class action against Apple and it's a sound case theory, that you can count on Apple to take care of their customers. They will typically email you to your Apple ID email, and they will say, this class action may impact you. Make sure you submit a claim if you qualify.
Even though Apple may not want you to do it, right? I mean, isn't that kind of counterintuitive?
Well, it's tough. As the defendants, on one side, they don't necessarily want people to know that they were accused of whatever is within this class action settlement. But on the other side, it is their legal responsibility to try to reach as many people as were actually impacted as possible. Does that happen all the time? No.
Yeah, you would think a big company would want to sweep it under the rug. So I guess I'm wrong then, because I don't think I've received a card in a while or an email, Scott, but I would think that it was the attorney or that law firm that would be getting these lists somehow and sending it out.
Correct. And so what happens once a class action settles, and so of course the defendant accepts no guilt when they settle it. They're just saying, hey, rather than continue to fight this case in court, we're going to settle it and take care of our customers. And so at that point, it is their legal and ethical responsibility to reach out to as many of the affected people as possible. Usually the plaintiffs are the ones that are trying to do a mass spend on the marketing to try to make sure everybody knows about it. And a lot of times the defendants are saying, wait, we don't want to spend, $1 million just in advertising for this class action settlement.
Right.
And so it's a dance that goes on between the defendant lawyers, the plaintiffs, and the plaintiff lawyers as to how aggressive their advertising can be.
But that's where you come in, right? I mean, it's a lot more affordable to reach out to a platform like topclassactions.com with your, I think you told me last week, about 25 million monthly sort of impressions between all of your media. And as you said, about 1 million people on your newsletter list. It's probably more cost effective for a law firm trying to get the word out to use your site.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because we have great journalists like yourself that are on our website. And so once we go ahead and publish a class action settlement, it goes out to the masses. And we keep trying to impress upon the settlement administrators who administer these settlements and the defense lawyers and the defendants and the plaintiffs. So, hey, use us. We're very inexpensive compared to running something, a large newspaper, something that might not get you that same impact, because every single consumer on Top Class Actions is actively looking to participate in a lawsuit or settlement. So they're much more likely to submit a claim.
More with topclassactions.com when we return, including how to tell if it's a scam or not. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
Follow Mark Saltzman on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Listen to Check It Out whenever you want.
are chatting with Scott Hardy, president of TopClassActions.com, a platform that connects you to class action lawsuits, settlements, and attorneys, not just in the US, but they've expanded to Canada and the UK and even more. We'll get to that in a moment. What's your advice then, Scott, for those who say that they could be a possible plaintiff in a class action lawsuit? Do you always say just do it?
Well, I would encourage them to, of course, speak to an attorney. They can do that through Top Class Actions, or they can go through a website like the National Association of Consumer Advocates. There are different websites like that will connect them to a lawyer. They can see if they have a case. If they have a case, then they want to determine, is it worth their time to become a lead plaintiff? Because it will be.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Scott. So you're talking about if you want to lead one of these things. I was thinking more of you were approached to join one. But no, this is great. So if you are genuinely upset with a company, you could lead the class action lawsuit and others can follow. You can get other plaintiffs behind you.
Exactly. If you've got a good class action and a class action attorney says, yes, you've got a case, then you can be that lead plaintiff and you'll be paid for your time significantly if it eventually settles. That means remote depositions and that kind of thing typically. But lead plaintiffs typically make $5,000 or more for their time spent on behalf of all the class members, which is why they get a big check compared to the average class member who is only being paid for the defect that they're being compensated for.
Right. Thanks for the clarification. If you were approached, hey, do you want to join this class action lawsuit? Should you bother? I've heard the payouts can be a couple of bucks in some cases. It may not be worth your time.
Well, in every case, if you get a postcard in the mail or you get an email for a class action settlement, I say absolutely spend that 60 seconds online and submit that claim. Because sure, sometimes it's only going to be $5, $10, $15. I just got a note that I'm going to get a $33 check for a hard disk drive class action settlement that's coming up. That's finally paying out after like 8 years. But I'm going to get $33 in the mail. And sure, you say, Scott, that's $33. What a bother. Well, $33. That's a really good lunch. That's an inexpensive dinner. And that's money that I wouldn't have in my pocket if I hadn't spent the minute and a half online to submit that claim.
And you hinted at something I was going to ask you next, which is how long do these things take?
It depends. It takes anywhere from typically 2 to 3 years for a class action to reach a settlement.
Right.
And then it can take anywhere from 1 to 3 years after that for it to actually pay out. So if we're really lucky, we'll see a class action get filed and then it will settle and we'll pay within 2 to 3 years. But typically it's 3 to 5 years.
Okay, thanks for that. And then finally, how do you know if it's a scam? Like what if you're approached by saying, hey, you are eligible for, I don't know, a $200 payout for this tablet that didn't live up to its promise, but you only need to pay $10 to register or something like that. To me, that would be a bit fishy, right?
Well, you want to take a look and you can do some Googling. In every class action notice, it will tell you who the attorneys are. Mm-hmm. So you can Google their law firms, make sure they're legitimate. A lot of times their law firms will list that class action settlement. They will always list a settlement administrator. You can call the phone number and make sure that they're legitimate. I mean, I've had techie friends that for these optical disk drive settlements, these hard disk drive settlements, these RAM settlements, random access memory settlements. Yeah. Those techie guys that were building their own computers, they're getting thousands of dollars from these settlements. And that's because they're submitting proof of purchase, because if you submit proof of purchase, you maximize your claim.
Sure.
But you do want to take a little bit of time and verify it yourself. Of course, if it's on Top Class Actions, then it's been verified by us and it's 100% legitimate.
And is it legit if you're ever asked to pay anything?
No. Participation in a class action settlement should always be free. And if someone has a question on that, they can email us questions@topclassactions.com, and my team will be happy to look it up and answer them at no cost.
All right. The website again is topclassactions.com. You can sign up for the free newsletter as well. Right at the top, there's a little pull down menu. Scott, it's been great chatting with you. As you can tell, I don't know a lot about this topic, so it's great to have a subject matter expert on the program. Good to talk to you, and congrats on your successes.
Oh, thank you very much, Mark. I really appreciate your time.
Again, if you want to read that article about class action lawsuits, you can just Google my name, Mark Saltzman, Mark with a C, Saltzman with a Z, and AARP in the search window, and you'll find the article. And again, if you're on social media, drop by and say hi. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. This show is powered by ASUS. ASUS creates technology for today and tomorrow's smart life, including its line of award-winning laptops, like that Zenbook we heard about a few minutes ago. Tech it out at asus.com/US/radio for all the information. Again, that's asus.com/US/radio. And hey, if you like this radio show, or maybe you're tuning into the podcast version, please feel free to share with a friend, a family member, a colleague. You can just search Tech It Out, Mark Saltzman, and I welcome any ratings or reviews or anything you want to leave there. It goes a long way. So thank you for your support. And we're gearing up, as I said at the beginning of the program, to our 250th episode and 5th anniversary of Tech It Out. So we're going to have some giveaways as well. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. We'll catch up with you next weekend for another episode of Tech It Out. Bye-bye for now.